1734, 1733, 32, 31. This clock in Tiananmen Square tells it all. Time is fast passing to the moment of truth, historically speaking. We welcome our CNN domestic audience to our live coverage of what is happening here in Hong Kong. I'm Bernard Shaw, along with Mei Lee, and just scores of other CNN people bringing this story to you. Among them, correspondent Mike Chinoy. He is inside the hall where the important ceremony is about 26 moments away. Mike?
Bernie, 4,000 invited guests are now seated here at the Grand Hall of the Hong Kong Convention Center. Two former British prime ministers, former British foreign ministers, the widow of China's late leader Deng Xiaoping. They're sitting waiting expectantly for Britain's Prince Charles and Chinese President Jiang Zemin and their key aides to take the center stage. In the meantime, a British military band and a Chinese military band have been alternating, playing songs to the applause of the audience here. There's also going to be a joint Sino-British Guard of Honor. In less than 30 minutes, the climax of this ceremony will come when the Union Jack and the flag of the British colony of Hong Kong, which you can see to the right of your screen, will be lowered, and the Chinese flag with the red backdrop and the 5 stars and the flag of the new Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China are raised. Chinese President Jiang is expected to speak for about 5 minutes. Then the ceremony will conclude, and Prince Charles and Hong Kong's outgoing Governor Chris Patten will leave and board the Royal Yacht Britannia, which will sail away into the night. We'll go now to my colleague Tom Mintier, who's outside the convention center. Tom?
Mike, I'm at Ledco, and their crowd is starting to grow here. They're in anticipation of, in about less than 45 minutes, Martin Lee will deliver a speech from the second-floor balcony here. The crowd, probably about 3,000 or 4,000 now. It's spread about a block and a half in both directions. Interestingly, some of the people who come up, out-of-towners, people who are not Hong Kongers, are wondering if it's safe to be here. Apparently, there have been some stories going around that demonstrations at the stroke of midnight would not be permitted, and those who are in attendance would probably suffer some dire consequences. I have seen the Hong Kong police around, and basically all they're trying to do is keep traffic moving. Many of the tourists are out here trying to make pictures in the middle of the street, and they go up to them very courteously and say, would you mind moving off the street and get out of the way. But this demonstration is underway and is expected to continue and climax with a speech from Martin Lee. Let's go to Andrea Koppel in Beijing.
Here at Tiananmen Square, where we've been reporting since 10 o'clock this evening on the festivities, which will go well into the wee hours of the morning, it has gotten a bit quieter as people watch the television screens behind me, watching what's taking place in Hong Kong. The Chinese traditionally have placed a lot of their clout and pride on large numbers, whether it's their thousands of years of history or their hundreds of millions of people. But at this moment, on this day, there is one number they're looking forward to, and that is 0. When 0 is on the digital clock behind me, that means Hong Kong once again returns to mainland Chinese sovereignty. The feeling here in China, if I were to equate it with anything else, it would be something like the 90-pound weakling in school who had always been picked on, and then years later gained weight and suddenly got to date and eventually marry not only the prettiest girl in school, but the wealthiest. Hong Kong coming back to China is a culmination of 156 years of waiting, and the Chinese people cannot wait any longer. Now we go to my colleague, Richard Blystone.
Henry, I'm on the seafront outside the Royal Yacht Britannia, which you see behind me. She was designed about 50 years ago for a woman who at that time could literally be called an empress. Her reign spanned half the earth. Now that same woman is the queen of 58 million people, and her son will take that boat tonight as her empire fades into nothingness. The Royal Yacht Britannia. It is 410 feet long, can move 22 knots, and has more than 200 officers and crew. It has been a useful means of transport for the Queen. It has been a home away from home when she makes state visits, and it's also been a place where British business can be very much done, a place to entertain, a thing of prestige. The yacht Britannia will be sailing away before dawn. There will be no more Empire, and in a little while, no more yacht Britannia. Bernie?
Thank you, Richard Blystone. In less than 22 minutes, Britain will give back to China what she took forcibly more than a century and a half. And CNN is here to bring it to you live. Our coverage will continue. The seconds continue ticking in China, approaching midnight, and CNN has learned that in a meeting, a brief meeting, but an important meeting, and certainly an important one symbolically, the president of China, Jiang Zemin, has invited the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, to visit China. You might recall that in the past 48 hours, that an invitation was extended by Britain's Foreign Secretary to the incoming chief executive, Mr. Deng Xihua. Foreign Secretary Robin Cook invited him to come to London. He has accepted. He's going in October. So, in a way, we can see a kind of reciprocity here in that the Prince of Wales is being invited to visit China. We have two scholars with us here in the studio, along with my fellow anchor and co-reporter, Mei Li. Professor Ming Sing is at the City University of Hong Kong, and we are looking at Li Peng, the vice premier or the premier of China. We'll be looking at these dignitaries on this podium inside the auditorium in the convention hall where the ceremonies will get underway very, very shortly. And also here in CNN's Hong Kong Bureau is Yale University Professor Wang Shouguang. Professor, I want to ask you, how important is it to China that the events here enable Chinese leaders to project their foreign policy? President Jiang, has a meeting with President Clinton later this year. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, for example, has expressed Washington's views on the U.S. relations with Beijing, for example. How important is it to the Chinese leadership that things come off very, very well here to help her, China, project her foreign policy with the United States?
I think the Chinese leaders have both domestic reason and international reason to keep the transition of Hong Kong as smooth as possible, and keeping the promise of maintain the stability and the prosperity of Hong Kong. For domestic reason, I mean, China used Hong Kong as the example for the future unification with Taiwan. Therefore, they want to show Hong Kong works well. Internationally, Hong Kong, Chinese leaders know very well the whole world is watching what is going to happen in the next 3 months, 3 years, and years to come. Therefore, they will be very careful to carry out the one country, two system policy, so that to make sure everything goes well.
It would seem to me, Professor Singh, that the Chinese leaders would have to be furious and just livid that anybody in the world, anywhere, would think that they would jeopardize what Hong Kong represents.
I don't think so. They will do that. Let me give you an analogy. Suppose Hong Kong is a house of China, but somehow was occupied by somebody else. This is a very precious house. I mean, it's a historical site. Now it's returned to China. China want to keep the house in order and probably in better shape than before. Therefore.
Well, why would people be fearful that China's leaders would not protect and nurture and further grow Hong Kong?
Because, in my view, this is kind of the first time of experiment of the one country, two system. And in many people's view, China didn't have, the communist China or the mainland China, many horrible things happened before. Therefore, people have doubt. I think that's understandable.
I wanted to ask you, Professor Wang, business and investors love security tranquility, something they can depend on. The leadership in Beijing, they want tranquility, security. They don't want any surprises. Might that act as a damper on the feelings of people in Hong Kong who want more freedom?
I think that's actually has been happening over the last half a year. Many Hong Kong people have a strong feeling that the so-called elected chief executive designates Mr. Tong has been handpicked by China because he has been chosen by 400 strong members, which has been appointed by Chinese government. And then now they are going to throw out the elected legislators from the elected legislative council and replace it by a provisional legislature. So that projects further testimony to their fears. And worst of all, I think many people have missed the point, including perhaps some of the Western leaders. It seems that they pin the hopes for the future prospect of Hong Kong's democracy on next year's elections. But then if we are careful enough about what has happened in the last 2 weeks, Mr. Tong Chi-wa's office has announced the plan to, first of all, he has appointed a lot of the members into the local municipal councils. So use appointments to add to some conservative elements in the future political structure. And secondly, even more important, they try to change the present voting method into the direction that can ensure the present pro-democracy party members, they will not win the same proportion of seats in the next year's election. So it's nearly quite certain that the Democratic Party in Hong Kong are going to be reduced to an insignificant minority in the next year's elections.
What you just said is very, very important.
Right.
Let's repeat just the basic element. You've just said that the chief executive to be, minute past midnight, Mr. Tong Chi-wa, given the appointments being made, given their conservative nature, regardless of whether they're democratic elections, and Mr. Tong has said they will have such elections next May, regardless of elections, free elections, everybody voting, the apparatus of powers in place so that nothing basically will change.
Well, basically, I do hold that view because right now, you know, in Hong Kong, the legislators are being selected on the basis of single seat, single constituency. And now they're going to propose 2 other possible methods to replace them. According to our surveys, if either one of those 2 possible methods will simply curtail significantly the potential power of the Democratic Party in next year's elections. And secondly, besides the direct election for next year, 2/3 of the seats are going to be produced through functional constituencies as well as election committees. And again, Mr. Tong Chi-wa has been proposed to curtail them, which will favor more the local conservatives.
All please stand for the arrival of the...
You're going to be seeing clearly important symbolic military ceremony here as this distinguished audience rises. I had mentioned to Mike Chinoy, the flags, they're indoors, but those flags are fluttering. Clearly one of the other plans. The President of China, Mr. Jiang Zemin, followed by his delegation, Premier Li Peng, Vice Premier Chen Chi-chen, and the Chief Executive to be, Tong Chi-wa. You saw the British official in all of his military dress uniform. That is Brian Dutton, Major General Brian Dutton, who was in charge of British forces here in Hong Kong. He was followed by Governor Chris Patten, Foreign Secretary Cook, Prime Minister Blair, and the Prince of Wales. Closest to each other on this stage, President Jiang Zemin and Prince Charles.
Please be seated.
请坐下。
His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
现在，请威尔斯亲王殿下讲话。
President Jiang Zemin, Premier Li Peng, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This important and special ceremony marks a moment of both change and continuity in Hong Kong's history. It marks, first of all, the restoration of Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China under the terms of the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984, after more than 150 years of British administration. This ceremony also celebrates continuity because by that same treaty and the many subsequent agreements which have been made to implement its provisions, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region will have its own government and retain its own society, its own economy, and its own way of life. I should like to pay tribute this evening to those who turned the concept of one country, two systems into the joint declaration, and to the dedication and commitment of those who have worked so hard over the last 13 years to negotiate the details of the joint declaration's implementation. But most of all, I should like to pay tribute to the people of Hong Kong themselves for all that they have achieved in the last century and a half. The triumphant success of Hong Kong demands and deserves to be maintained. Hong Kong has shown the world how dynamism and stability can be defining characteristics of a successful society. These have together created a great economy which is the envy of the world. Hong Kong has shown the world how East and West can live and work together. As a flourishing commercial and cultural crossroads, it has brought us together and enriched all our lives. 13 years ago, the governments of the United Kingdom and the People's Republic of China recognized in the joint declaration that these special elements which had created the crucial conditions for Hong Kong's success should continue. They agreed that in order to maintain that success, Hong Kong should have its own separate trading and financial systems, should enjoy autonomy and an elected legislature, should maintain its laws and liberties, and should be run by the people of Hong Kong and be accountable to them. Those special elements have served Hong Kong well over the past 2 decades. Hong Kong has coped with the challenges of great economic, social, and political transition with almost none of the disturbance and dislocation which in other parts of the world have so often accompanied change on such a scale. The United Kingdom has been proud and privileged to have had responsibility for the people of Hong Kong, to have provided a framework of opportunity in which Hong Kong has so conspicuously succeeded, and to have been part of the success which the people of Hong Kong have made of their own opportunities. In a few moments, the United Kingdom's responsibilities will pass to the People's Republic of China. Hong Kong will thereby be restored to China, and within the framework of one country, two systems, it will continue to have a strong identity of its own and be an important international partner for many countries in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, China will tonight take responsibility for a place and a people which matter greatly to us all. The solemn pledges made before the world in the 1984 Joint Declaration guarantee the continuity of Hong Kong's way of life. For its part, the United Kingdom will maintain its unwavering support for the Joint Declaration. Our commitment and our strong links to Hong Kong will continue and will, I am confident, flourish as Hong Kong and its people themselves continue to flourish. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I should like, on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen and of the entire British people, to express our thanks, admiration, affection, and good wishes to all the people of Hong Kong who have been such staunch and special friends over so many generations. We shall not forget you, and we shall watch with the closest interest as you embark on this new era of your remarkable history.
All please stand for the flag ceremony.
降旗升旗仪式现在开始，请全体起立。
As we approach the moment of truth, midnight here in Hong Kong, what will happen very briefly, once the Chinese and the Special Administrative Region, or SAR, flags are clipped to the flags on the pole, the British flags and the Hong Kong flag will be lowered, and we will hear God Save the Queen. Each contingent here represents the Royal Hong Kong Police Force and the SAR Police. They are bringing the flags to the flagpoles. And for a hall of 4,000 people, all you hear are the footsteps of these officials. As the seconds wind down, all you can hear in this hall of 4,000 plus people are the heels and the footsteps of these authorities.
The Union flag and the Hong Kong flag will now be lowered, and the national flag of the People's Republic of China and the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region flag will be raised.
现在将联合王国国旗和香港旗升中华人民共和国国旗和香港特别行政区区旗。
British Guard of Honor, look up! British Guard of Honor, defense up!
请坐下。现在，
Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, a picture of resignation. Tiananmen Square, a picture of jubilation. Hong Kong has returned to the motherland. And now the President of China, Jiang Zemin.
Prince Charles, Prime Minister Tony Blair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the national flag of the People's Republic of China and the regional flag of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China have now solemnly risen over this land in Hong Kong. At this moment, people of all countries in the world are casting their eyes on Hong Kong. In accordance with the Sino-British Joint Declaration on the question of Hong Kong, the two governments have held on schedule the handover ceremony to mark China's resumption of the exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong and the official establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. This is both a festival for the Chinese nation and a victory for the universal cause of peace and justice. Thus, July the 1st, 1997 will go down in the annals of history as a day that merits eternal memory. The return of Hong Kong to the motherland after going through a century of vicissitudes indicates that from now on, the Hong Kong compatriots have become true masters of this Chinese land, and that Hong Kong has now entered a new era of development. History will remember Mr. Deng Xiaoping for his creative concept of one country, two systems. It is precisely along the course envisaged by this great concept that we have successfully resolved the Hong Kong question through diplomatic negotiations and finally achieved Hong Kong's return to the motherland. On this solemn occasion, I wish to express my heartfelt thanks to all the personages in both China and Britain who have contributed to the settlement of the Hong Kong question, and to all those in the world who have cared for and supported Hong Kong's return to the motherland. On this solemn occasion, I wish to extend my cordial greetings and best wishes to the 6 million or more Hong Kong compatriots who have now returned to the embrace of the motherland. After the return of Hong Kong, the Chinese government will unswervingly implement the basic policies of one country, two systems, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy, and keep the previous socio-economic system and way of life of Hong Kong unchanged, and its laws basically unchanged. After the return of Hong Kong, the Central People's Government shall be responsible for the foreign affairs relating to Hong Kong and the defense of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region shall be vested in accordance with the Basic Law with executive power, legislative power, and independent judicial power, including that of final adjudication. The Hong Kong residents shall enjoy various rights and freedoms according to law. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region shall gradually develop a democratic system that suits Hong Kong's reality. After the return, Hong Kong will retain its status of a free port, continue to function as an international financial, trade and shipping center, and maintain and develop its economic and cultural ties with other countries, regions, and relevant international organizations. The legitimate economic interests of all countries and regions in Hong Kong will be protected by law. I hope that all the countries and regions that have investment and trade interests here will continue to work for the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. Hong Kong compatriots have a glorious patriotic tradition. Hong Kong's prosperity today, in the final analysis, has been built by Hong Kong compatriots. It is also inseparable from the development and support of the mainland. I am confident that with the strong backing of the entire Chinese people, the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Hong Kong compatriots will be able to manage Hong Kong well, build it up, and maintain its long-term prosperity and stability, thus ensuring Hong Kong a more splendid future. Thank you.
And that's the first time that President Jiang Zemin has spoken in Hong Kong. Proud moment for him and 1,000 million other Chinese.
President Jiang Zemin returning to his seat here. And it has been done. If you're just joining our live coverage, wherever you are in the world, Hong Kong has returned to China. A very interesting, deft understatement uttered by the president of China. He said that Hong Kong had gone through a century of vicissitudes. Andrea Koppel is in Tiananmen Square. Andrea, what's it like?
Well, Bernie, they've gotten a little quiet now. Actually, now they're going to start cheering again. Every time they see China's president appear on the television screens behind me here at Tiananmen Square, every time they hear China's national anthem and the flag, especially when the British flag, the Union Jack, came down and the Chinese flag went up, they jumped out of their seats, started clapping spontaneously. Parents were holding their children up in front of the digital clock to get their pictures taken. And the crowds on the other side, just in front of where I'm standing, in the heart of the square itself, were pressing up against the security that is lining the area here in the square. Bernie, the mood is absolute one of pure joy.
And inside the hall here in Hong Kong, the mood is one of wonderment, reflection, as the Prince of Wales and the President of China, Jiang Zemin, step even closer to the audience now. At one point, you saw the picture of Prince Charles looking very sad, looking very resigned to this historic moment here in Hong Kong. CNN reported a short while ago that the gentleman on the right of your screen, now on your left, the President of China, has invited the Prince of Wales to come to China. And we know from a couple days ago, Britain's Foreign Secretary Robin Cook has invited the chief executive, even though he hasn't been sworn in yet, he is, for all intents and purposes, the chief executive, Tong Chi-wan, to come to London. He has accepted. He will do that in October. Among our many people covering this important story, CNN's Tom Mintier.
Here, what you couldn't see while the countdown was underway was a situation here at the Legislative Council. Many of the legislator members were standing on stage behind me here. They were all holding torches, similar to the Goddess of Democracy torch. There were at least a dozen of them on stage, and it was quite a sight as they counted down the last seconds here before the handover. And it was a very emotional scene as you listened to people count the seconds down. And the speakers were also saying to support the return to China, but at the same time, protect democracy. It was a chant that rang across this square for a good 5 minutes leading up to the countdown. Of course, none of the people here came to see the handover ceremony that was happening a few blocks away. The handover ceremony they're holding here is a little different. There is music, there are plays, there are speeches, and in about 30 minutes, Martin Lee will come, the leader of the Democratic Party, to deliver his version of tonight's events, how the handover is seen by his party as far as the future of democracy here in Hong Kong. Bernie?
Thank you, Tom and Tier. The people inside the Grand Hall who've just witnessed personally what has been happening there are beginning to stand around and filter out. Inside the hall, at the back of it, is Mike Chinoy.
Bernie, it was a very powerful ceremony. You could have literally heard a pin drop when the flags were being lowered, and then the British flag being lowered, and the British-Chinese flag was being raised. The speech by President Jiang Zemin was very interesting on a couple of points. First of all, it was focused very heavily on the return of Hong Kong to China, made very little reference to how much of a success story Hong Kong has been under British administration. But Jiang went out of his way to take a very, very positive note in his comments about Hong Kong, reiterating that Hong Kong will be allowed autonomy, it will be allowed to maintain its own way of life. He said it will be able to maintain its role as an independent free port, its own currency. He said Hong Kong would, in fact, move ahead towards democracy, but suitable to Hong Kong conditions. That's a fairly important qualification. But it was clearly designed to reassure people that the central government here is going to abide by the commitments it made in the Sino-British Joint Declaration. Now you can see the principal figures in this ceremony leaving, Prince Charles and Governor Patton heading off shortly to the Royal Yacht Britannia, where they will sail out of Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is now a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. In little over an hour, Tung Chee-hwa and his administration will be formally sworn in. Bernie?
Mike, as we know, each spokesman, the Prince of Wales and the President of China, chose their words very, very, very carefully. I was struck at one point by President Jiang in referring to the systems, assuring people that here in Hong Kong those systems could be kept. At one point, he said, its laws will basically be unchanged. And I was struck by the phrase, basically unchanged.
Picked up on something I noticed too. That clearly gives China the option to do some tinkering with the legal system. In fact, that's one of the reasons why at the swearing in of the provisional legislature in about an hour and a half, the U.S. Secretary of State and Britain's Prime Minister, who were here at this ceremony, are not going to be there because that legislature is going to implement some changes in laws on the right to demonstrate and other civil liberties that many people fear here could lead to curtailment of their freedoms. Bernie?
Among the people who will not be going up to Hall number 3 upstairs for the swearing in of either the provisional legislature or the chief executive, Mr. Tung, will be former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. She said it just is not right, and of course, since the Foreign Secretary of Britain is not going to go, she, Mrs. Thatcher, of course, would not go against what the British delegation is planning to do.
A legacy of ill will and squabbling. In some ways, it's remarkable that this whole ceremony came off at all. The two sides were at loggerheads on so many issues for so long, but in the end, they managed to stage a ceremony that was extremely dignified, solemn, as President Jiang said, and appropriate, I think, to the momentous weight of the occasion. Bernie?
Mike Chinoy inside there, and outside along the waterfront is correspondent Richard Blystone. And Richard, this is one of the last times that the Royal Yacht Britannia will be starring in any kind of big event of this kind because she's going to be decommissioned later this year.
That's correct, Bernie. As far as we know, this will be the last official journey of the Royal Yacht Britannia, which is headed off for nobody knows quite where, but the end of the British Empire and the end of the Royal Yacht Britannia are all a part of the same diminution in the status of the British monarchy. You have here an honor guard waiting for the arrival of Prince Charles, who himself, of course, was quite a skilled aviator in the Navy some years ago. And people waiting here for his arrival, which is expected in just a few minutes. He will board. About 20 minutes later, they will set sail for the Philippines. He will be, of course, joined by Governor Chris Patton, ex-governor now, and his family, and they will be off. Over across from us in the Tamar parade ground where we saw the military exercises earlier to address Mike Chenoy's point about how the one sound you haven't heard here is of rival national egos clashing. Prince Charles got quite an ovation from a crowd which has been there watching a popular entertainment show up until the end. After Charles spoke, he got a cheer. The bigger cheer, it has to be said, went for the raising of the Chinese flag there. So the British military who performed there will be headed out now as we speak, and very soon Prince Charles as well with this vestige of the Navy. Now back to you, Bernie.
Richard Blystone there at the dock. We'll go back when the Prince of Wales and his delegation arrived there. If you're just joining our live coverage from Hong Kong, from China, a century and a half ago, when Britain took Hong Kong from China, it was war. Tonight, China reclaimed Hong Kong. Not a shot was fired. Our coverage will continue in a moment. Waiting to receive the Prince of Wales. He is leading the British delegation, having turned over Hong Kong to China. His motorcade is making its way to the area, the East Timor Naval Base, formerly British-controlled. Tamar is the name of a river in Britain, and this was known as the East Timor Naval Base. The black limousines, many of them Rolls-Royces in this motorcade, coming through the rain-drenched streets of Hong Kong, making their way to the dock. Richard Blystone is there. Richard had reported earlier that looks like Britain's Foreign Secretary there, standing to the right of that sailor. It looks like that. He is there to greet His Royal Highness, as he's referred to. And once they go aboard, they will be steaming across the South China Sea, going to the Philippines. The Britannia will be escorted by 3 British naval vessels that will be sold to the Philippines. One of the important escort vessels will be the frigate, the HMS Chatham, aboard which Major General Brian Dutton, who formerly was the head of the British troops here in Hong Kong, he will be on that frigate, HMS Chatham. There are not throngs, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets here in Hong Kong. A lot of people watched what was going on in their apartments, in their condominia, in their homes because of the weather. And also, you're coming, you perhaps have one more holiday here, and Hong Kongers are taking advantage of that. Observing all this is Lien Chan, the Vice Premier of Taiwan. And Mr. Premier, we welcome you to CNN and CNN International. A lot has been made of the fact that in this handover, Beijing would have an upper hand, having brought back to the motherland, Hong Kong, with the question of what is going to happen with the country you represent, Taiwan. Does that upset you? Does that bother you?
Well, Mr. Shaw, this is a historical moment. Hong Kong, after a period of 156 years of British colonial rule, has finally been returned to the Chinese people. We are pleased with that development. But our feelings are mixed, nevertheless, because we do share the international concern about the future of Hong Kong. It is a future fraught with uncertainty. In the near future, perhaps the communist wishes to maintain the status quo here. But in the long run, it's very hard to tell. Perhaps in the economic area, they will maintain its free market, its prosperity. But politically, we believe it will enter a period of political retrenchment. The
Mr. Vice President.
Yes. Yes?
Mr. Vice President, I must ask you very directly.
Yes.
Do you see any way that Taiwan would rejoin the motherland? Does the formula of Deng Xiaoping, one country, two systems, have any opening, any possibility for Taiwan to rejoin the motherland?
Well, I think the relationship between the two sides of the strait can be emphasized with two very crucial ideas, and that is status quo and engagement. We want to maintain the status quo between the two sides of the strait, and we also encourage engagement and exchanges in order to bring a better cross-strait relationship. Republic of China is a sovereign state. We were founded in 1912, and we have been in existence for the past 86 years. We're also a democratic country with a government democratically elected. So we must be held accountable to the public will of the people. And thirdly, we are also a country that has maintained and established a wide international presence. And also, we have enough deterrent military capabilities to safeguard our own security and sovereignty. So it's entirely different case. But in the guidelines for national reunification drafted in 1991, we have provided 3 different phases for the eventual reunification. We believe that mutual and reciprocal exchanges between the two sides will lead to mutual trust and cooperation. That will in turn bring consultation and eventual political reunification. In other words,
Mr. Vice President,
we believe, yes, yes.
Please continue that thought.
Yes, we believe that reunification should be realized not only as a territorial or jurisdictional unification. It should be something more than that. The country should be reunified under the principle of freedom, democracy, and prosperity. So, in other words, we adhere to the principle of one country with a good system of government, not one country with two systems.
If I could just ask you to pause for a moment, Mr. Vice President. To our CNN domestic viewers, we say thank you for joining our coverage. We're going to be here for many, many hours to come. We salute you as you depart and go back. And continuing our interview at the East Timor Naval Base here in Hong Kong on the waterfront, the Prince of Wales has arrived with the British delegation, and he will be piped aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia, and they will be departing very, very shortly, headed for the Philippines. We're talking with the Vice President of Taiwan, sir, and I just heard you say that freedom and democracy and prosperity are important to you. You believe in one system, one country, not one country and two systems. In essence,
that's right.
To really condense every point you've made over the past 4 minutes, are you in effect saying reunification never?
Well, it will come only after gradual and sequential processes. We will start building up mutual trust and cooperation. Then it will lead to political consultation and eventually national reunification. It is a process that we have to be patient.
Well, you're mentioning patience. You say you've got to go through 3 different phases: mutual, reciprocity, building up trust, cooperation, consultation. But I hear you saying that China will have to change before Taiwan changes.
Well, the fact is that we're not looking only for territorial or jurisdictional reunification. That is important, but that is not all. We believe all people should live under a free system, a democratic system. Nobody here on this island will voluntarily accept communism as a system of society or as a system of government.
This has been a CNN Live event.
British officials looking on solemnly. A colonial era here in Hong Kong ends. A new era in Hong Kong begins as the Chinese flag goes up. And the flag on the left is the Special Administrative Region flag. Welcome back to all our viewers around the world. This is CNN and CNN International's continuing live coverage of the Hong Kong handover. I'm Bernard Shaw. Extreme emotions this early morning in the free port of Hong Kong. For the British, sadness and resignation. But for the Chinese, joy and completion. On both sides, though, expression of confidence in Hong Kong's future.
The solemn pledges made before the world in the 1984 Joint Declaration guarantee the continuity of Hong Kong's way of life. For its part, the United Kingdom will maintain its unwavering support for the Joint Declaration. Our commitment and our strong links to Hong Kong will continue and will, I am confident, flourish as Hong Kong and its people themselves continue to flourish.
After the return of Hong Kong, the Chinese government will unswervingly implement the basic policies of one country, 2 systems, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and a high degree of autonomy, and keep the previous socio-economic system and way of life of Hong Kong unchanged, and its laws basically unchanged. After the return of Hong Kong, the Central People's Government shall be responsible for the foreign affairs relating to Hong Kong and the defense of Hong Kong.
From the hand of the Chinese president, this expression of friendship to the former rulers of Hong Kong. And from the spot where Chairman Mao Zedong declared the Chinese people have stood up, this overwhelming expression of jubilation. Back here in Hong Kong, just about a mile from the site of the handover ceremony, a different kind of crowd gathered around Hong Kong's Legislative Council building. Pro-democracy demonstrators lit a flame of democracy at the stroke of midnight. At that moment, this territory's first fully elected legislature ceased to exist. It is being replaced by a provisional legislature, which was selected by committee. A few of the Democratic legislators who lost their jobs at midnight took over the balcony outside this building, and their leader, Martin Lee, vowed to continue to push for democratic reform.
We are proud to be Chinese, more proud than ever before. But we ask ourselves this question: why is it that our leaders in China will not give us more democracy? Why must they take away the modest democracy that we have fought so hard to win from the British government?
That comes as the protectors of Hong Kong's fledgling democracy sail into the night. The Prince of Wales being serenaded by this ceremonial British military band. Chris Patton there, standing on the rail, looking out over the beautiful Victoria Harbour. A wave. The Prince of Wales there to your left. Patton said he would be coming back to Hong Kong. He's going to go off to the south of France. He's going to write a book, and he says he's going to do some gardening. Britain's Foreign Secretary earlier departed, and Mike Chinoy is back at the exhibition hall. Among the British officials who are not going to be there for this important second part of the ceremonies, former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and of course the British diplomatic delegation, United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Mike, we're approaching the time when we're going to see some swearings in.
That's right, Bernie. At 1:30, there's going to be a massive swearing-in ceremony, including Tung Chee-hwa, who will be sworn in as the new chief executive, and most controversially of all, the provisional legislature appointed by China last December to replace the one elected under the democratic reforms of Chris Patton. But there's some other significant appointments that are going to be confirmed tonight, including all of the key judges in Hong Kong, the heads of the civil service, and these appointments are important as symbols of continuity. There was considerable uncertainty as to whether all of the key figures in the leading, in the judiciary and civil service would go through. Some of them have been very closely associated with Governor Patton, strong supporters of his reforms, critics of China's policy. But in what has been widely viewed as one of the more positive confidence-building gestures, these figures are also going to be sworn in and will be keeping their jobs. And one of the interesting things that we'll be following in the weeks and months ahead is how the political dynamic plays out when you do still have in the Hong Kong government and civil service considerable numbers of senior people who are associated with Patton, working side by side with an administration headed by Tung Chee-hwa, which wants to undo a lot of Patton's political reforms, and of course the provisional legislature. Although one should point out on the provisional legislature that 33 of its members were also members of the existing legislature, and they decided for reasons of pragmatism or opportunism that they would stand for positions in the provisional legislature. So even though the provisional legislature has been condemned because it was appointed and not elected, there's a fairly wide range of opinion inside it, and the whole political dynamic changes now without Governor Patton, but there's still an interesting political game to be played out here, Bernie.
Mike, Martin Lee spoke to his supporters outside the Legislative Council building. Chinese leaders, he said, you don't win trust by getting rid of an elected legislature and replacing it with an appointed one. And then Mr. Lee went on to call for, give us democracy, in his words, fair and open and guaranteed stability and freedom, fair and open elections. We know that Mr. Tung, the incoming chief executive, has said that there will be elections in May. But is it not true also that the strength, the level, the numbers of the Democratic Party members will be lessened?
That is certainly a very possible outcome. One of the big question marks and one of the benchmarks that the rest of the world and Hong Kong itself will use to judge the success of this transition is the elections that will be held, according to Mr. Tung, in May of next year. There is considerable debate and discussion about the precise format for those elections, and there's been talk about not making it one man, one woman, one vote, but creating a system of proportional representation or another kind of electoral structure that would be designed, according to the critics, to minimize the success of the Democrats and maximize the success of political parties that are sympathetic to China. Of course, it will be the provisional legislature that will discuss and decide the arrangements for the election, and many people here are skeptical that those in the provisional legislature, and I should point out that there are some people in the provisional legislature who ran against the Democrats in 1995 elections and lost and were then appointed to this provisional body. There's a lot of concern that they may not want to create a structure for elections next year in which they would lose. So I think everyone in Hong Kong and elsewhere in the world, people who care about Hong Kong, will be watching very closely. One other point about Martin Lee and what you were just saying, Bernie, Chinese leaders in Beijing are not used to their citizens lecturing them about democracy. Their track record in terms of protest is not a very positive one, thinking back, of course, to the Tiananmen Square crackdown. So one of the interesting other issues to watch is how outspoken will the Democrats continue to be, and whether or not China will put pressure on Mr. Tung to try and crack down. It is interesting to note that so far this evening, all of the protests appear to have gone quite smoothly. There had been all kinds of concern that after midnight, when Hong Kong reverted back to China, and that the police might take a tougher line, that the Chinese leaders might call for a crackdown. So far, that doesn't seem to have happened, so that, I would think, would be an encouraging sign that the political discourse and political debate here, in one form or another, is going to continue. Bernie?
Mike Chudoi, a point you made is indeed well taken. You said that Chinese leaders in Beijing are not accustomed to being lectured in public, or for that matter privately, by fellow Chinese about democracy. You'll notice that Martin Lee, in his address to his followers, took pains to stress that he too is a patriotic Chinese. He said, "This is the most glorious day for all Chinese people in every corner of the world." Well, in one very important corner of China, Andrea Koppel, Tiananmen Square.
Bernie, the Chinese people have waited almost 50 years since the founding of the People's Republic of China here in Tiananmen Square on October 1st, 1949, to have another party. And they're doing it right now. It's started at 10 this evening. It's going to run all night long here in the heart of China's capital. It's going to run until the flag is raised at dawn. It's been an eclectic mix of entertainment, and we're in the midst of some of it right now. We've had the Peking opera singers, we've had young children, we've had acrobatics. It's been a lot of fun for the people here, but they're not a really rowdy group. This is, you could almost imagine them sort of sitting on their couches at home watching this on television, and if it weren't for this spectacular backdrop, they might very well be. They're not really jumping up, clapping, or doing anything of that nature. However, having said that, before midnight, in the final countdown before Hong Kong's return, it was a completely different situation. These were people, you could read it on their faces, who finally, after more than 150 years of waiting, were getting back what had been theirs and had been taken from them. The look on their faces was pure joy. And then, of course, the fireworks. This was the second show of fireworks. There will be one more before the night is through and before this party is over and before they go home and get some rest, Bernie. Fortunately, July 1st is a national day of a holiday here in China, and so everyone will be able to get a good night's sleep before the partying begins again tomorrow evening, with President Jiang Zemin delivering a speech at the Workers' Stadium. Reporting live at Tiananmen Square, I'm Andrea Koppel. Back to you, Bernie.
Thank you, Andrea. Our audience Among the CNN domestic viewers, we know that you're going to cut away now and continue with CNN Today. CNN International, we will be here in Hong Kong with more of our live coverage. Some very important events leading up to the official emplacement of the government of Hong Kong will get underway very, very shortly in roughly 5 minutes. I'm Bernard Shaw. We'll see you very, very shortly.
Hello and welcome again to CNN Today. I'm Linda Stouffer.
I'm Lou Waters. We're planning more live coverage of our Hong Kong situation. We've been getting favorable response from our viewers to our coverage so far. In about 5 minutes, we will get back over to Hong Kong for the swearing-in ceremonies for the new Chinese regime in the colony of Hong Kong. In the meantime, some news around the country. Tongues are wagging about Mike Tyson, as you may know. Even the president chimed in this morning. Mr. Clinton said he was horrified at Tyson's behavior in his championship fight Saturday night. In case you haven't heard, Tyson bit Evander Holyfield twice. Holyfield retained his heavyweight championship belt, but lost part of an ear. His attorney says the champ may file suit against Tyson. That could be the least of Tyson's troubles, though. A Nevada boxing commission is to meet tomorrow to consider fining Tyson and suspending him from the fighting there. A sampling of public opinion shows Tyson's behavior did not endear him to many fans.
I love fights. I watch them every week. That was ridiculous. He knew he was beat. He knew he was fighting a better man, and he just wanted the easy way out.
Man, that man is sick. He gonna bite a person's ear. He getting 30 million. Just fight the man. To do something like that, you gotta be scared of him. I think he was intimidated by Holyfield. He didn't think he could beat him, and he just snapped. He's gonna be in Silence of the Lambs too.
Ever in my life, the kid was hungry. You know, that's being hungry for a fight. But people don't realize that him and Jeffrey Dahmer, they grew up together.
In the wake of Tyson's disqualification, his $30 million purse is being withheld, at least for the time being. He can be fined up to 10%, $3 million.
Some mixed economic news today on the eve of a Federal Reserve Board meeting. Consumer spending in May edged up a moderate 0.3%, according to the Commerce Department. A separate Commerce report finds new home sales shot up 7% in May, rebounding from April's big loss. Every region except the West saw gains. Some analysts say the Fed will likely hold off raising interest rates for the time being. The board is holding a two-day meeting beginning tomorrow in Washington.
You've heard of personal shoppers, but in a Minnesota courtroom today, a jury is being selected in the case of a personal shoplifter. A dentist, his wife, and 2 grown children face charges of providing a thief with a wish list of items such as Baccarat crystal, Armani suits, designer dresses, and the like. Police set up a sting operation in the family's home after the accused shoplifter was busted and snitched, saying he sold $250,000 worth of goodies to the family over the years. One criminal law professor calls the case one of, as he put it, just good garden variety greed.
Well, coming up after the break, we're going to take you back live to Hong Kong for more of the transfer activities, including the swearing in of Hong Kong's new executive.
President Jiang Zemin sitting down for an important part, second only in importance to China getting back Hong Kong at that ceremony roughly an hour and a half ago. But now the officials are going to run this city. Andy Ho, political commentator, is watching this too. So there's a lot of apprehension because Hong Kongers just don't know what's going to come from the official body, a body almost handpicked by Beijing.
Well, our only hope now is that many of those who are already in the provisional legislature would seek re-election within a year. So I think the people in Hong Kong will be putting a lot of pressure on them, you know, for them to behave. before we have a fully elected legislature again.
Very interesting. And of course, Prince Charles, Secretary of State Albright, all indicating that they will be watching China and watching what happens to the people here.
请全体起立，奏中华人民共和国国歌。请坐下。
The Chinese national anthem, as we prepare for the official swearing in of Mr. Deng Qihua, a man who's respected around the world, a man who has many, many contacts in the United States. This is President Jiang Zemin of China. He will not be in Hong Kong very long. He and his official delegation will be returning to Beijing for important business back in the capital.
特别行政区政府现在成立。现在开始宣誓就职。
Now the swearing in
首先
of the main officials. We start with the Chief Executive, Mr. Deng Qihua.
He makes.
请中华人民共和国国务院总理李鹏
Mr. Li Peng.
宣誓。
本人董建华
I, Deng Qihua,
宣誓
now solemnly declare
中华人民共和国香港特
I
别行
take
政
up
区
the post
行政长
of
官
the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong
中
SAR.
华人民共和国
I will support
香港特别行政区
the
基本法
basic
效
law
忠中华人民共和国香港特别行政区，尽忠职守，遵守法律，廉洁奉公，为香港特别行政区服务，对中华人民共和国中央人民政府和香港特别行政区负责。
现在由香港特别行政区政府主要官员宣誓。
Now the swearing in of the main officials of the Hong Kong SAR government.
请中华人民共和国国务院总理李鹏监事。
Mr. Li Peng, Prime Minister.
As Hong Kong SAR officials, except one that does not meet nationality requirement. He did this for the consideration of smooth transition of Hong Kong.
本人就任中华人民共和国香港特别行政区政府。中华人民共和国香港特别行政区政府政务司司长。定当拥护中华人民共和国香港特别行政区基本法。中华人民共和国香港特别行政区基本法。效忠中华人民共和国香港特别行政区。效忠中华人民共和国香港特别行政区。尽忠职守。尽忠职守。遵守法律。
Well, the principal officials promised to uphold the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China, bear allegiance to the Hong Kong SAR, and serve the Hong Kong SAR conscientiously, dutifully, in full accordance with the laws, honestly, and with integrity.
Officials that have just sworn into office include Chief Secretary Anson Chan, Secretary of Finance Donald Tsang, Secretary of Justice Elsie Leung, and 20 others.
Hong Kong officially has its government sworn in. Tom Mintier has been watching what has been going on inside as well as outside the building. Tom, what happens to the former LegCo, the Legislative Council that ceased to exist once these men and women took the oath of office?
Once the oath of office was taken, Bernie, basically it has reverted, it has changed it. The LegCo members who were elected here in the last election in Hong Kong, those who were not carried over, the majority of them, basically are not serving now. And what Martin Lee said a little earlier was that they would run for the seats the next time they came up. They pledged to be politically active, and it was a very politically active speech that Martin Lee made here before several thousand supporters in front of the LegCo. Many of the laws that they pass in their marathon session in this final week will probably be the first order of business when the provisional legislature meets in a few hours, taking away what was done or undoing what was done very quickly and trying to put the laws that they've been working across the border in Shenzhen, put those laws into effect. So there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some old laws that are going out very quickly and a whole slew of new laws that are going to be in. But we saw, I think, probably the beginning of the political season. I don't think that Martin Lee is going to be quiet, shy, or reserved from what we heard from him tonight here, Bernie.
And Tom Mintier, a man inside on the stage, the new chief executive, Tung Chee-hwa, has indicated there are certain things that he will not tolerate. He said in terms of liberties, one example, one category, public demonstrations, protest marches. He said, yes, people can commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre, but no, nobody can publicly call for the support of an independent Tibet or an independent Taiwan. That's he, Mr. Tung, with his back to you. He is going to address this audience. We're going to hear what will be his program. And Mike Shinoy, inside hall number 3 on the second floor from where we saw the earlier turnover ceremonies, what is crucial right now in the early hours of this infant government?
Well, Bernie, what's crucial is, first of all, to get it up and running, and second of all, they're going to have to move quickly to really consolidate their credibility, particularly that of the provisional legislature. Behind me now, Tung Chee-hwa is swearing in his executive council. That's his sort of cabinet. It's considered to be a fairly conservative group dominated by wealthy businessmen who are distinctly pro-China in their views. Tung himself is at a very, very difficult job ahead. He's got to have a balancing act that's going to satisfy the people of Hong Kong, the government in Beijing, and the international community. It's going to be a tough act.
One of the things...
Born in China, raised in Hong Kong, educated in Britain, employed for many years in the United States. Until last fall, head of a worldwide shipping empire, Tung Chee-hwa embodies the mixture of East and West that makes Hong Kong tick. But will it be the right mix for one of the toughest jobs in the world? In personal style, the 60-year-old Tung, known to many as CH, is very Western, open and direct, at ease hobnobbing with friends like former U.S. First Lady Barbara Bush, or chatting about his favorite American football team, the San Francisco 49ers. But there's another side.
Despite the fact that he's actually been so exposed internationally, he's remained very Chinese.
In fact, Tung, in many ways, is a traditional, conservative Chinese patriarch, fond of espousing Chinese values.
We are Chinese, and we're proud to be Chinese. There is a need for us to renew our commitment to the values we hold dear, a belief in order and stability, an emphasis on obligation to the community rather than rights of individual.
It is a conservative philosophy very much in line with China's leaders, whose preference for Tung became clear when he was singled out by Chinese President Jiang Zemin at a reception in Beijing in early 1996. In December of last year, a 400-member electoral college composed of Hong Kong VIPs chosen by China picked Tung to be the future chief executive. And he soon lent his support to Beijing's moves to throw out Hong Kong's elected legislature and impose new curbs on civil liberties. But Tung's supporters say these close ties to China give him a unique ability to deal with Hong Kong's new political masters.
The fact of the matter is Hong Kong is going back to China, and CH has the ability to work with China as well as the Hong Kong people. CH Tung's approach is by building a bridge to get to know China better, have a better relationship with China, so that China will let us to have our way of life long into the future.
Tung's bridges to China go back a long ways. His father, C.Y. Tung, ran a shipping business in Shanghai, which he moved to Hong Kong when the family fled the Communist Revolution, part of an influx of Shanghai refugees, which helped turn Hong Kong into an economic dynamo. But when his father died, C.H. inherited a business in crisis. In the early 1980s, he was bailed out by a $120 million loan from China, a fact he did not reveal until last year. That's raised questions about how much independence Tung actually has from Beijing, questions that have taken on additional importance because the Hong Kong he will be governing has changed profoundly in recent years. Its people much more politically sophisticated and much less willing to accept the paternalistic rule of business tycoons and appointed chief executives.
I'm personally very doubtful whether he will be able to lead Hong Kong and also to break away from the image that he's a Beijing yes man, and also break away from the image that he is controlled by the tycoons in Hong Kong.
For any leader, governing post-colonial Hong Kong would be an incredibly tricky balancing act.
Just how tricky that balancing act is going to be is underscored by what's just happened behind me. In the last moments, Tung Chee-hwa has sworn in the 60 members of the provisional legislature. They swore an oath to uphold the basic law, the mini-constitution for Hong Kong, and they got a big round of applause when Tung finished giving them the oath. But they now have a real job to do, both in terms of winning credibility and legitimacy with the public of Hong Kong and grappling with some very tough legal issues, such such as passing a law on sedition and subversion and debating and ultimately passing laws that Tung has proposed that will lead to curbs on demonstrations on the right to form political parties to get what Tung describes as a better balance between civil rights and public order. Bernie?
Mike, in terms of winning credibility with people, not just here in Hong Kong and not just within the borders of China, but with people around the world, observers who will be watching the goings-on here, Mr. Tung, in an interview with CNN, had this response when he was asked about people who think that he and Beijing might botch the administration of Hong Kong. We asked him how he felt about that, what he thought about people who hold such an opinion.
We have to look at very carefully why Hong Kong has been very successful in the past, and it is very important to make sure these critical success factor which we have enjoyed in the past all be maintained. Now, Hong Kong has been very successful because Hong Kong people, very entrepreneurial, very hardworking, and very committed to Hong Kong. Secondly, the Chinese economy over the last 18 years has done wonders, and Hong Kong has got a lift from this tremendous economic activities in China. But what is important, Bernie, is that the rule of law, the freedom we enjoy today, and the system of governance, they are also part of our critical success factors. So all these will be protected, and they will be protected not only by me, but because the basic law, which is our constitutional framework, says so. They will be protected.
Mr. Tung, in the 1980s, China bailed out your company with very crucial loans. Can you really stand up to Beijing? Can you really be independent? Can you resist Beijing if you have to as chief executive here?
Well, Bernie, again, I'd like to make a correction. The company, my family company, had financial difficulties in the mid-80s. I was helped by interest from China. So I was also helped by the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, by some Japanese bankers, by European bankers, and a lot of parties were involved in helping the financial reorganization, which eventually was successful. Now, I'm grateful to each and every one of them. But from their point of view, this is a commercial deal. This is a financial deal. Actually, for the investment from China, their return has been very, very good. Now, that's number one point. Number 2 point, Bernie, is this, that I'm now going to become the chief executive, and I will run Hong Kong, and will do so in the best interest of Hong Kong.
You will tell Beijing no when you feel it should be so told?
Absolutely. But what is important is this, Bernie. Hong Kong's long-term interest and China's long-term interests are the same. Because if we are successful, we can contribute to China's modernization. If China is very successful, it will help Hong Kong in the longer term. So our long-term interests are the same. Now, if in the short term, there will be disagreement. New York will have disagreement with Buffalo. Los Angeles will have disagreement with Sacramento. And everywhere else we have disagreement with Washington. You are the same in your country. Now, when these disagreements come, we will talk it through, find the right way to move forward. But the important thing is the long-term interests are the same.
I hear you saying you're not a puppet.
That's right.
And to flesh out just a little bit more about Mr. Tung's background, a man who practices Tai Chi in his garage. He's nicknamed 7-Eleven. He gets into work at 7 in the morning. He quits at 11 at night. This man lived in the United States for almost a decade, working for General Electric. He has lots of powerful American friends, among them former President George Bush. He also studied in England at Liverpool. He studied marine engineering. And he and President Jiang Zemin of China were born in Shanghai. And as Andrea Koppel reported from Beijing, at a big reception last year in Beijing, President Jiang walked up to Mr. Tung and shook hands with him, and symbolically that told observers this man is very important. And tonight, here in Hong Kong, he is China's new chief executive of this territory. Our coverage from Hong Kong will continue in a moment. Now to the remarks of Premier Li Peng. He is addressing those who've just been sworn in here in Hong Kong.
Of China to warmly congratulate on this establishment of the Hong Kong SAR. I will take this opportunity to assure you and to thank you on behalf of my colleagues. We also like to thank those who helped to elect this.
从今天起，中华人民共和国香港特别行政区基本法开始实施。香港特别行政区
The Hong Kong SAR first Chief Executive and the main government officials
临时立法会议议员、终审法院和高等法院法官已经宣誓就职。
They have all been sworn in.
历史赋予你们
History
重任
is now giving you an important task.
厚望。
We all expect highly of
希
you.
望你们
We hope
爱国爱港的
you
精神
will make good use of your spirit of patriotism
各尽职守，
and support
中央人民政
the
府将全力
central
支持
government
行政长官
and make Hong Kong a good success.
特别行政区政府
We hope you will all support the chief executive.
大家庭中，香港同胞
You will
会以自己
give the people of Hong Kong a good time
为保持香港的长期繁荣稳定，做出
and
积极的贡献。
contribute to the long-lasting prosperity of Hong Kong.
香港回归祖国。
The return of Hong Kong to the motherland and the establishment of the government of Hong Kong SAR marks the successful application of Mr. Deng Xiaoping's great vision of one country, two systems in resolving the question of Hong Kong. It represents an immense success of the Chinese people in their pursuit for complete national reunification. At the same time, it is a major contribution to the cause of universal peace and progress. Hong Kong has now entered a new historical era, and its future will be even more splendid. Thank you all.
Premier Li Peng has just delivered a speech congratulating
Premier Li Peng saying some things that were very, very interesting. I'm anxious to hear the reaction of some of our analysts here who have been assisting in our coverage and giving wider perspective to what's been going on. I was especially struck by Li Peng just saying that the handover of Hong Kong to China assists in the pursuit of complete national reunification. And of course, that means Taiwan too. Here is Teng Chi-hua.
President Jiang Zemin, Premier Li Peng, my fellow countrymen and friends. This is a momentous and historic day. After 156 years of separation, Hong Kong and China is whole again. We are here today to announce to the world, on our terms and in our language, that Hong Kong has entered into a new era.
Hong Kong's new chief executive welcomed the dignitaries as the Chinese retake control of Hong Kong after 150 years. CNN's live coverage will continue throughout the day from time to time. We will leave CNN International at the moment. We'll welcome our domestic audience to join us for CNN Today, which begins in 2 minutes.
What many regard as the ultimate den of capitalism is now back in the fold of China's communist dictatorship. About 2.5 hours ago, the British tricolor flag was lowered in Hong Kong and the red flag of the People's Republic of China was raised. It brought to end 156 years of humiliation for China, which was forced to hand over the territory after losing wars Britain waged to force the Chinese to buy opium. In China's capital of Beijing, the sea of people and the sounds said it all. Tens of thousands of people packed Tiananmen Square in a lavish welcome back ceremony. Giant TV screens allowed the masses to watch the flag-raising ceremony in Hong Kong. For former Hong Kong Governor Chris Patten, it was an emotional evening in farewell. As soon as the handover was completed, Patten and Prince Charles boarded the royal yacht Britannia. Then they sailed off into the early morning hours as Hong Kong swore in its new local rulers. Less than an hour after the territory reverted back to China, former Hong Kong lawmakers, democratically elected to their positions, staged a demonstration. With the midnight handover, they were disbanded and replaced by Beijing's hand-picked officials. Martin Lee, leader of the Democratic Party, called on China to give Hong Kong more democracy. China has promised at least a degree of democracy, but only for a limited period.
Hong Kong long has been known as a play hard, work hard place, rolling in money.
And for those who spent time there, it is a city with no match. But will all that change now? CNN's Richard Blystone reports, whatever happens, the people of Hong Kong will continue to do what they do best.
There's a lot in this place that you'll never find with a spin of the rack. Sometimes Hong Kong will reveal itself, past, present, and future, all in a glance. But you have to look sharp. Whatever happens, it'll never be quite this way again. It never is. You can try to carve things in stone, as Wing Yuan carves chops. People want new ones to stamp "Welcome the handover" on their letters. If nothing ever changed, the chop business would petrify. Permanence guaranteed at Ricky's tattoo parlor, but here, tastes are always changing. Ricky made up these for the handover. He says they're really popular with Americans and Australians, but Hong Kong people don't care to wear indelible political opinions. Hong Kong's always been in a hurry, but now that the race with Shanghai is on, there's no time to lose. Onward and upward, with the world's longest escalator system, Hong Kong's answer to China's Long March. Hong Kongers have to be upwardly mobile. Developers have a little land and a lot of chips, and they stack them high. Here, a sampan suburb dwindles as the neighbors go high-rise. But they still use bamboo scaffolding here because it holds up better in typhoons, just as they favor abacus over calculator because it's faster. If you don't believe it, changes. You're still digesting your dim sum brunch from the traditional floating restaurant. And you're off to that most genteel of English institutions, afternoon tea at the grand old Peninsula Hotel. Hong Kong, capital of world superlatives. Most billionaires per capita, highest ownership of Rolls-Royces, most cell phones, 1 person in 10 has one, and the metro's fixed so you can phone on the move underground. What's Hong Kong short of? Revolving doors, for one. They cost more than doormen. Also, bargains, restaurants as modest as this one, and horn-blaring rush-hour free-for-alls like you'd see in any self-respecting city elsewhere. Hong Kongers wait for lights to turn and seem to know that with density like theirs, the choice is get along or explode. Whatever happens to Hong Kong now, they'll know how to cool it. Richard Blystone, CNN Hong Kong.
As for what Americans think about the handover, in a new CNN USA Today Gallup poll, 56% of those asked said the handover will make things worse for the people of Hong Kong. Asked if they support the handover, 43% said they do, 38% oppose, and 19% said they were unsure.
Well, we have a show buzz report coming up. We all know that there's no buzzness like show buzzness, and we will tune in for that and find out what movie I helped make #1 this weekend. I'm so proud.